Last month, Hank Green made a video about a math puzzle that seemed to be engineered to make people argue about it on the internet, and he said that watching this argument changed the way he looks at humanity. His video created what Hart called a loophole for meta-controversy, and then she made a video going much deeper on the problem. Don't worry, this video isn't about the problem itself. Hank Green and Hart are two of the most accomplished, friendly, amazing YouTubers out there, and there's nothing I can say about the problem that they haven't already said, and said better than I could. Both of their videos are fantastic and very much worth watching before this one, and I've put links to both of them in the description below. So, hi. I'm Neem, and the reason I'm here making this video is that I think Hank and Vi end up talking about the same underlying idea, and it's something that I've written and thought about a lot. It's basically, how do we work on a problem when the definition of the problem is unclear, or the definition changes as we work on it? I think there is a pattern to how we do that work, whatever it is we're working with. I called that pattern conceptual labor and wrote a theory about how I think that pattern works. This video is going to focus more on the pattern than the names I gave to it, but at the end I'll talk a little more specifically about conceptual labor. Both Hank and Vi ended up saying a lot of things that I think overlap with the theory of conceptual labor, and I'm hoping that I might be able to use it to support what they're saying, and maybe even contribute some more tools to have this kind of conversation the next time it pops up. Okay, so let's get into the problem. Hank says that there are two right answers. One of the answers is actually a set of answers that could be either 12 or 18. And then the other answer is to say that the question is wrong. We'll get to that one in a second. The insight that Hank had here that, in his words, shifted his view of the social internet was about how easy it was for non-mathematicians to feel like they had the right answer. He says, it's not just that people believed different things in this situation, it's that it is easy to believe different things looking at this problem. It is as easy to know that the answer is 12 as it is easy to know that the answer is 18. So if that's you, you're working in this box. You're working in the problem as written. But of course the problem as written is unclear. If you think you've solved it, then you think you've also defined the problem in a solvable way. Regardless, if you have an answer, you'll be working within the boundaries of the problem. Hank offers two possible on-paper answers, so let's say that there are two definitions of the problem, one with right answer X and one with right answer Y. But there's no way to work within the problem as written and determine which of these is true forever and for everyone. So Hank puts these in their own set. This is its own definition of the problem. It's one that says you can solve the problem. Hank points out, though, that the other right answer is to say that the question is wrong, which gives us a new definition of the problem and the work we have to do on that problem. By doing some conceptual labor, Hank can escape these boxes. Doing so lets him talk about the space between the right answers, and one of the things in that space is people arguing on the internet. And he sees how tempting it is to feel good about the box where you did your work, and ignore the work that can happen around it, and how that makes us defend our little boxes a lot more viciously than if we were okay moving out of them.
The only people who are right are the ones who know they don't know.
Going off of what we drew here, we could say that the only people who are right are the ones who know that their box, their definition of the problem, isn't this monolith where truth lives. If they know they don't know, then they can escape it and ask more questions. Hank says the right answer is to say the question is wrong. I agree. Kinda. It's right to respond to the question that way, but it's not the answer in the sense that the question is now answered. It's the answer in the sense that one can answer as a verb, answer as a response. It's just that it's the answer or response we have to keep giving. We can't stop here. Luckily, Hart exists, and she certainly doesn't stop here.
We are gonna go so much deeper into this than anyone asked for.
Vi says,
Hank thought he was settling the question by giving some insights into manufactured controversy over ambiguous questions that are easy to argue about, but not the kind of questions any expert would ever care about. But little did he know that in saying this, he created a loophole for meta-controversy where people wanted to know my opinion as a mathematician.
Loophole for meta-controversy. We will definitely come back to that. So if we say that the question is wrong, how can we make it right? How many different right questions can we come up with? When our work creates these loopholes, and we have to draw a meta box, remember that the new box still contains all the lower level boxes that got us here. So keep asking questions can actually send us back down into more detailed boxes as we ask those questions. Going meta makes you go deep, but with a greater awareness of what it is we think we're doing. Vi dives back in and proposes a thorough set of possible answers based on her expertise. It's the same process Hank went through, it's just more complex because as a mathematician, Vi's concept of math is much more powerful and detailed. It's no longer just x and y, it's x, y, z, l, m, n, o, p, q, r, s, t, u, v. She's pulling all the knobs and turning all the levers on a model of the question to see how different interpretations of its symbols affect the outcome of its internal logic. After doing this, she invites us to pass judgy judgment on all of our brain thoughts. That is, consider all these possibilities against each other. Vi says we need to ask, are all answers of an ambiguous question actually equal? This is what Hank's answer actually looks like. Asking this continuously as we work and imagine. It's a process and it's not a linear one. It is a, well, it depends instead of a one weird trick. This is what happens when the idea we have about the work we should be doing is incomplete or unclear enough that while working, we break out of that idea and redefine it as we work. We get that loophole that Vi is talking about. The thing is, it's not unique to this step. We didn't just encounter meta-controversy now, we've been doing it the whole time. This is the pattern that gives us Hank's answer. Inside each of these boxes is the potential to go through the same process with their contents. By going into thorough detail, Vi is showing us the nuts and bolts of the assumptions that feed the acrimonious arguments that Hank was talking about. The willingness to do this and do it freely is the opposite of the obstinance that it takes to dig your heels in and say, my one box is right. And she makes this fun. She shows us the joy in being flexible enough to interrogate your brain thoughts as far as you want out of this chain of boxes within boxes. It's a different kind of work to understand in detail what we think we're doing while we're doing something. Out here, we tinker with the concepts we use in here as we use them. It's the difference between driving a car and fixing your car as you drive it. It's conceptual labor when you're turning the knobs and dials on the ideas you use to work. It's an endless series of asking, what am I really doing here? Or as Vi says, passing judgy judgment on your own brain thoughts. That's something I love about Vi's videos, because conceptual labor is hard and often disorienting. But Vi's over here like, what if your triangles were giraffes? So if we don't dig in and instead frolic with Vi among the symbols, we can actually get somewhere. While frolicking, Vi reads numbers in patterns as number sin patterns. This joke is actually super important. We can learn a lot about conceptual labor if we just overanalyze this innocent joke half to death. So, Vi is writing words, but at the same time, she's reading the words to us. So here's two models of what Vi is doing. Those of us fluent in English have access to lots of the levers and knobs of the concept of English words. We can pass informed judgy judgment on our brain thoughts while we work with English, and we can make adjustments to make things more fun for ourselves or to understand complex meanings. As Vi makes that joke, we can watch her have a little, what am I actually doing here moment, and change it to English word play. Now, as the reader, we can't just work inside this box anymore. Our models are different. Like all good wordplay, the interpretation of the words here is actually part of the trick. This whole problem is about numbers and patterns breaking rules and being wrong. Numbers, sin, patterns. If we read the words straight, they break some rules. So we have to imagine new rules that would make more sense. That imagining propels us out of the meta loop to let us make new thoughts and shapes of thoughts. We go on a tiny detour that makes us break from how we expect these symbols to work, shows us that there are so many more possible ways the symbols could work, and treats us with a little joke as a reward for trying out that process. Look, we just did conceptual labor to read a joke. What's awesome is that we can see how this joke is a tutorial for the main mission. Watch. We can replace English language with math and write with do math. We can be doing math play rather than math. And Vi's great at that. Math play will get us somewhere, and acrimonious argument won't. While playing with the pieces of this problem, Vi substitutes programmer for mathematician, which changes our context to do programming, which would suggest some pretty solvable interpretations in that context. But how do we know if that's quote-unquote right? Well, somebody wrote this puzzle, right? Somebody did the work to make it, and they had an idea of the work they were doing. How did they define their work? Asking that led to maybe the best line of Vi's video. "You can't death of the author this math test at me." Vi says,
I feel like more people could understand that the author's intentions are relevant to the meaning of math symbol communication, just as with all communication, and this is why, in real mathematics, communication goes two ways. Proofs get refined, definitions get clarified. We keep going until we reach a mutual understanding, and sometimes that takes a long time. Sometimes I have an urge to rant for 5 years about just how much of supposed objective, pure, apolitical mathematics is subjective, cultural, has certain kinds of human experience at its very foundations, and just because a mathematician asserts that math is objective and apolitical by definition does not make that an actual feature of math.
by now we can see that working on unclear problems requires some idea of who's doing the working, not just on the problem, but within the problem and around the problem. It's a different solution if a programmer is programming than if a mathematician is mathing or if a YouTuber is social commentarying. And beyond that, it should be pretty clear that for whatever logical system you are proposing to follow out here, the logic of that system can stay consistent and as objective as it can be in here without invalidating the very relevant cultural and subjective contexts that create that logical system. This model only contains logic to the degree that, as part of your conceptual labor, you imagine an author employing that logic in the creation of the context in which you are going to do your logic-y logical work. So, if anything, this is why I'm throwing my hat in the ring. Vi's 5-year rant is something I really agree with, and I feel like my work is able to lend some support to it. Most of the reason I made this video was that I hope that all of this drawing of boxes helps people see how she's right. And I can relate to Hank when he says thinking about this changed his view of humanity. I think about this every single day. See, I think the kind of critical thinking that Hank and Vi are talking about, conceptual labor, is important enough to, well, talk about a lot. I think it's worth looking for useful patterns and terms that would let us talk about it more easily and see it more clearly. I think getting more familiar with the process of conceptual labor can have a really big impact on your life and your work. That was kind of my 10-year rant, which turned into a theory and this book. And I decided to call the pattern that Hank and Vi are following conceptual labor. I call the boxes models, and I divided their components into actors, work, and context. These are just the terms and patterns that I think we should or could use, no more perfect and logical and true than the number one is a natural reflection of the concept of one thing. But they work well enough that they've gotten us here. This is the process of conceptual labor, or in other words, the kind of work that you have to do when the work you do in here breaks out of the box and makes you do work on the box. Hank's video was about how you can be totally right inside a box. But if you cling to that idea, you can't do conceptual labor. You can still be right here, but if you move here without asking yourself what you're really doing, well, of course you're going to start yelling at people. You think you're doing the right work, but you're in the wrong place. And when we draw it out, we can see that Vi is not saying anything more controversial than that. Math can remain very logical inside the box, but if we're talking about the broader world, we can't cling to that logic. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop, for now. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much, Hank and Vi, for making your super engaging and smart videos. I don't know how you do it so fast. This one took me forever. If you want to learn more about conceptual labor, I've put some links in the description here. As long as Twitter still exists, my DMs will be open at Conceptual Labor, and pretty much everything I do about conceptual labor goes up at conceptual-labor.com. All right, keep playing, have fun.